Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the previous track, we were talking about the Mithaq, and we mentioned two different opinions about the ayat of Surah Al-A'raf. And just to recap and simplify what we have said, the first opinion held by many scholars about the ayat of Surah Al-A'raf is that it speaks about exactly what the narrations of Ibn Abbas and others speak about, that Allah Jalla wa Ala made the progeny of Adam alayhi salam speak and testify that Allah is the only deity worthy of worship. There are other scholars who say no. Firstly, these ahadith or the narrations are not authentic. Those which mention that Allah made the progeny of Adam speak, they say those narrations are not authentic. And as for this particular ayat of Surah Al-A'raf, it does not make mention of the progeny of Adam being made to speak in the testimony, but rather this is the testimony bilisan al-hal, the testimony of your state. And that this testimony or the shahada which is spoken over here is the shahada without any verbal testimony. Just as, for example, the mushrikun would testify against themselves that they are kuffar. They wouldn't do it verbally, but in terms of the lisan al-hal, in terms of how they are. So the scholars say that this ayah speaks about the fitrah, that the natural knowledge of mankind testifies to la ilaha illallah. Yes, they don't testify verbally, but they testify bilisan al-hal. Their state testifies to it. Their natural knowledge, inbuilt knowledge of the one deity testifies. So these are two opinions. They are both held by eminent scholars. But in any case, one thing which we can say with confidence is that in this ayah there is no evidence that just your fitrah is enough to establish the evidence against you, and that you do not need messengers to come down and remind you of this fitrah of yours. Rather, the punishment can only be established after the messengers have been sent to you, or at least the warners carrying the message of the messengers have been sent to you. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We were not going to punish anyone until we sent a messenger. So the natural knowledge of the fitrah which every human has is not enough to establish punishment against them. So if we ask the question that in the ayah of Surah Al-A'raf, what is this shahada, what is this testimony? Well, according to the first opinion, it is the verbal testimony, just as mentioned in the hadith. And according to the second opinion, this testimony is by way of the fitrah, natural knowledge. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. It is the creation of Allah which Allah has created mankind upon. There can be no change to the creation of Allah. And likewise, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every child born is born upon the fitrah. And this is the Hanafiyyah, deen inclining to Tawheed. Hanafiyyah means you're inclining. And this second tafsir of Surah Al-A'raf is given by many of the scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Abd al-Izz, who has explained Al-Aqidah Tahaawiyyah, and many other ulama have given this tafsir, that it does not mean that this is a verbal shahada, but rather this is a shahada from the fitrah, because your fitrah is a testimony. And in any case, even if those scholars say that the narrations of Ibn Abbas and Ubay ibn Ka'ab are indeed authentic and we have to go by them, then there's nothing wrong with saying that this ayah and those narrations are speaking about two different events. So it is possible then to reconcile the ayah and those narrations. And Allah Jalla wa Ala knows best. So anyway, that is the mithaq. Whichever of the tafsir we go with, we cannot say that the knowledge of the fitrah is enough to establish evidence. The messengers were sent to remind people of their fitrah, as their parents and their surroundings, their friends, the fashion, all of this serves to distract people and to make people forget their fitrah. So that was the mithaq. Then Shaykh then goes on to speak about the knowledge of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this is linked in with the qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Now Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi mentions the qadr in parts here and there. He does not mention it all in one go and all together as the ulama usually do in their books. He says, وَقَدْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِيمَا لَمْ يَزَلْ عَدَدَ مَنْ يَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ وَعَدَدَ مَنْ يَدْخُلُ النَّارَ جُمْلَةً وَاحِدَةً. Allah knew the total amount of people who will enter the Jannah and those who will enter the fire. He knew this eternally in the past. فَلَا يُزَادُ فِي ذَلِكَ الْعَدَدُ وَلَا يُنْقَصُ مِنْهُ. So this number cannot be increased nor decreased. وَكَذَلِكَ أَفْعَالُهُمْ فِيمَا عَلِمَ مِنْهُمْ أَن يَفْعَلُوا. And also the actions of the servants, He knows what they are going to do. And the hadith which speak about Allah Jalla wa Ala bringing out the progeny of Adam alayhi salam and putting them into two groups. One group is for the Jannah and the other group is for the fire. And all this before they were even born, thousands of years before. Now, the Prophet ﷺ was asked by the companions, if Allah knows what's going to happen, then what's the point in us performing actions? And the Prophet said, اعملوا فكل ميسر لما خلق له. Work, because everyone will find it easy to do those actions for which he has been created. Meaning, if you're from the Jannah, you will find it easy to do actions of the Jannah, and likewise for people of the fire. And the Prophet recited, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. As for the one who gives charity and has taqwa, and he believes in the best, then we make easy for him the path of ease. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. But as for the one who is stingy and sees himself to be self-sufficient and denies the best, meaning this deen, then we make easy for him the path of hardship. So the point here is that one should not think that Allah is forcing anyone to do righteous actions or anyone else to do evil actions. No, rather the point is that Allah Jalla wa Ala knows what actions people are going to perform and what actions they will find it easy to perform in accordance with their predilections. So the people that Allah knows will be the people of Jannah. They will have the predilection to perform righteous actions. And as for those whom Allah knows will be the people of the fire, then they will have the predilection to commit evil actions. Making it easy for the people of Jannah to perform the actions means that Allah Jalla wa Ala gives them this grace. So it's a grace from Allah Jalla wa Ala. The fact that you're even performing righteous actions in and of itself is a grace from Allah, that He has made it easy for you. Okay, so how come He hasn't made it easy for the kuffar? Well, the point is that this bounty or this grace is Allah's to give. And if He chooses not to give it to other people, then it is His bounty and His grace He gives to whomsoever He wills. It's not like it is yours and Allah has taken it away from you. Yes, sure, that will be transgression and that will be dhulm. But Allah has not taken anything away from you because you didn't have anything to begin with. So Allah Jalla wa Ala can give to whomsoever He wills. And as for those whom He does not give this grace, then He has not wronged them. If 10 people come to you asking you for charity and you give to 3 of them and you do not give to the other 7, then the 3 of them you have given them your grace, and the other 7 you have not wronged them, because you did not owe them anything in the first place. So why would Allah deprive people of this fadl, of this grace? Well, they themselves have chosen to go down the path of Jahannam, and Allah Jalla wa Ala simply helps them along. Again, Allah Jalla wa Ala did not force anyone to go down that path. So to the people of Jahannam He gives adl, justice, and to the people of Jannah He gives fadl, grace, which is more than simply justice. So this is why the Shaykh goes on to say, وَكُلٌّ مُيَسَّرٌ لِمَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. Everyone will find it easy to do that for which he has been created. And he says, وَالْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. And your actions are decided by the last of your actions. He's referring to the hadith found in the Sahih, that a man can perform actions of the people of Jannah until he only has a forearm between himself and Jannah, and then the decree overtakes him and he performs the actions of the people of the fire and enters into it. And likewise, one of you can perform the actions of the people of the fire until he only has a forearm between himself and it, and then the decree overtakes him and he performs the actions of Jannah until he enters it. But this hadith, however, needs to be understood in the context of another hadith which says that a person performs action which seem like the actions of Jannah to the people, but in reality he is from the people of the fire. And a person may perform actions which look like actions of the fire to the people, yet he is from the inhabitants of Jannah. But as for the true mu'min who has iman in his heart and he performs righteous actions, then Allah Jalla wa Ala never wastes the actions of those who do good. And he goes on to say, وَالسَّعِيدُ مَنْ سَعِدَ بِقَضَاءِ اللَّهِ. And the happy person is the one whom Allah has decreed that he will be happy. The Shaykh is referring to the hadith when the angel comes and writes down 4 things when a person is in the belly of the mother: his rizq, his lifespan, his actions, and whether he will be shaqi or sa'id. Shaqi meaning wretched or sa'id meaning happy. Let us take some talking points. We pick up that the knowledge of Allah does not have a beginning, like it does not have an end. We take that the knowledge of Allah pertains to everything, as in the statement in Surah Ghafir, وَسِعْتَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ رَحْمَةً وَعِلْمًا. You encompass everything in your mercy and knowledge. Now the fact that His knowledge does not have a beginning means that ignorance is not antecedent to Allah's knowledge. Because for us, when we get to know something, which means we did not know it before. So we were ignorant and then we became knowledgeable. Such a thing is not possible with Allah Jalla wa'ala. He was never ignorant of anything. So His knowledge is azali, without beginning. So Allah Jalla wa'ala has knowledge of the past, He has knowledge of the future, so what will happen, and He has middle knowledge, which is to say that if something happens, how will it happen, and what would result from it. And next we need to speak about the stages of qadr. The first one is knowledge. The second one is al-kitaba, when He writes it down. The third one is al-mashi'a, that which Allah wills to happen. And the fourth one is that everything is a creation of Allah. So then as for the first stage, whoever denies the knowledge of Allah Jalla wa'ala, that Allah has prior knowledge of everything, then he has committed kufr, no doubt. And the first people to reject the knowledge of Allah Jalla wa'ala appeared during the time of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. And when he was informed about such people, he said, "Inform them that I am free of them." And he also, in reply, narrated the hadith Jibreel, which is the famous hadith where Jibreel alayhi salam came in the form of a man wearing white clothes and well-kept dark hair. And Umar radiallahu anhu reported this particular hadith. The evidence that these people give for this belief of theirs is from the Quran. They use ayat like in Surah Al-Baqarah 143, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الْقِبْلَةَ الَّتِي كُنْتَ عَلَيْهَا إِلَّا لِنَعْلَمَ مَنْ يَتَّبِعُ الرَّسُولَ مِمَّنْ يَنْقَلِبُ عَلَىٰ عَقِبَيْهِ. And we did not make the qibla which you are upon, except that we may know who will follow the messenger from those who will turn back on their heels. So they say, look, Allah Jalla wa'ala Himself says, so that we may know who will follow the messenger and who will turn back on his heels, which means that Allah Jalla wa'ala did not know previously. However, such ayat in the Quran, and there are a few, need to be looked at with the other evidences, in conjunction, all together. For example, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَبْرَأَهَا. No affliction befalls in the earth, nor in yourselves, except that it is written in a book before we bring it to pass. So not only does Allah know about it, it is already written. Likewise, His middle knowledge, وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ لَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. If Allah knew there to be any good in them, He would have made them listen, or made them hear. And if He did make them hear the message, they would have turned away in aversion. And also just general ayat like وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا, and Allah is knowledgeable of everything. As for their particular evidence which they quote, such as the one we have just mentioned, and others like وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ, and Allah has not yet known those who will strive in His way from you. Then the way to reconcile is to say that you have two types of knowledge. The first knowledge is when Allah knows what's going to happen, but He cannot punish or reward anyone due to this knowledge. He cannot put you in Jahannam, and then you ask Allah, why did you put me in Jahannam? So Allah Jalla wa'ala will not say, oh, but I knew already that in the future you will become a kafir, therefore I'll just put you in Jahannam anyway. You would clearly say, no, that's wrong. The evidence has not been established against me. How can you punish me? So there is a difference between the knowledge of Allah when He knows something is going to happen, and the knowledge from which punishment and reward result. And then we can also say that there is the antecedent knowledge and the subsequent knowledge. So you know when something is going to happen, so that's your antecedent knowledge, and then you know that something has happened, that is your subsequent knowledge. So you have knowledge of the future, you know that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, this is your antecedent knowledge. And then when the sun has risen tomorrow, you now know that the sun has risen, so this is your subsequent knowledge. So we need to understand that the antecedent knowledge is knowledge of Allah which has not yet manifested, and the subsequent knowledge of Allah is knowledge which has manifested. So we have then the Qadariyya sect. They deny the Qadar. The extremists from amongst them deny the antecedent knowledge of Allah. But as for others, they do not deny the antecedent knowledge, but they deny the creation of Allah, that Allah creates the actions of the servant. Because they say that if the servant commits evil actions, then this is not a creation of Allah, because Allah Jalla wa Ala does not approve of evil actions. We find then that nothing will happen just purely out of chance, but rather Allah Jalla wa Ala knows about it and has decreed it to happen, because nothing can happen in the universe of Allah Jalla wa Ala which He does not approve of. Now, approving of something is not the same as actually loving it, so do not get the two concepts mixed up. Now one may ask, why does Allah permit in His universe what He does? So this is all about the Qadr. At-Tahaawiyyah says, وَأَصْلُ الْقَدَرِ سِرُّ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي خَلْقِهِ. And the root of the Qadr are the secrets of Allah Jalla wa Ala about His creation. He goes on to say, لَمْ يَطَّلِعْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ مَلَكٌ مُقَرَّبٌ وَلَا نَبِيٌّ مُرْسَلٌ. No near angel, nor any prophet that has been sent can see the Qadr of Allah. Meaning he does not know what will happen and why things happen, why they happen. They do not always know the hikmah, the wisdom behind it, and neither do they know the Qadr, meaning to know the knowledge of the future. So why has this person been afflicted with such and such a calamity? Why is this person rich? And why is this one suffering poverty? Why did this country suffer a tsunami but the other one did not? So these types of questions are really trying to probe into the wisdom behind why Allah Jalla wa Ala does what He does. And this is not always apparent to us. And this is why At-Tahaawiyyah says that the Qadr of Allah, the asl of it, the original roots of it, are the secret of Allah Jalla wa Ala about His creation. Now the problem with speaking about such matters is that if you really want to know the wisdom behind why something happens, and you are unable to arrive at this wisdom, you end up rejecting the Qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. You end up saying things like, oh, how can such and such an event take place? How could this possibly happen? Or why did this not possibly happen? It should have happened, but it did not. Why is this? So when the wisdom does not become clear to you, you end up rejecting the Qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this creates yet further doubts, which leads to deviancy. And as we have quoted before, we'll quote it here again, because it is pertinent, the lines from Ibn Taymiyyah's poem At-Tahaawiyyah, which speaks about Al-Qadr. He says, وَأَصْلُ ضَلَالِ الْخَلْقِ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ هُوَ الْخَوْضُ فِي فِعْلِ الْإِلَهِ بِعِلَّةٍ فَإِنَّهُمْ لَمْ يَفْهَمُوا حِكْمَةً لَهُ فَصَارُوا عَلَى نَوْعٍ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. And the roots of the misguidance of every group of people is that they delved into the actions of Allah with regards to their justification. So why does Allah do what He does? And it goes on, and when they did not understand the wisdom behind these actions, they became a type of jahiliyyah. But the point is, we say that as long as you realize that Allah Jalla wa Ala has full knowledge of events that will happen, and that He permits them to happen, then there is no doubt that it must follow that He has allowed them to happen and wanted them to happen due to a wisdom that is with Him, even if these actions seem negative or perhaps disastrous. But if knowledge and will of Allah Jalla wa Ala, so if these two are accepted, then the hikmah has to follow. It absolutely has to follow that there must be a hikmah, as long as we affirm knowledge, which is ilm, and will, which is mashi'ah, that Allah knew about it and willed it to happen. And we find in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khadir, Musa alayhi salam did not know why Khadir was doing what he was doing, simply because Musa alayhi salam did not have knowledge of the wisdom. But that does not mean that there was no wisdom behind it. This episode, mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, teaches us a vital lesson to keep patient about those things we have little knowledge about. Al-Khadir did the things he did because about those matters he had more knowledge than Musa alayhi salam. So what was upon Musa alayhi salam was to keep patient, because he's dealing with someone who has more knowledge than him in these particular affairs. Now if this is the lesson with just Khidr, who is only a human being, then what about Allah Jalla wa Ala, who is all-knowing? He cannot be asked why you are doing this and why you are doing that. We know for sure that first of all He has full knowledge, and then secondly He has the willpower to implement what He wants to be implemented. If these two are true, then it must follow that they are done with hikmah, with wisdom. And hence, even if we do not understand the wisdom, He cannot be questioned about what He does. He clearly tells us in Surah Al-Anbiya, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. He cannot be questioned as to His actions, but rather the people will be questioned. So the point is that the Shaykh says that the asl of the qadr is a secret of Allah Jalla wa Ala about His creation. The qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala is simply Allah Jalla wa Ala doing in His universe as He wants to. And if you think about it, if we allow these questions to be asked, why did Allah do this, or why did Allah not do this, then we will have billions of people, each coming with billions of individual questions. Why do I have this much money? Why don't I have any more? Why does he enjoy such and such and I do not? Why this? Why that? The questions literally will not end. Now, are we supposed to answer all of these questions? So we hope you see that if we start asking these questions, we actually open up a can of worms to which there is no end. Tahaawiyyah rahimahullah goes on to say, وَالتَّعَمُّقُ وَالنَّظْرُ فِي ذَلِكَ ذَرِيعَةُ الْخُذْلَانِ. And going deep into this and looking at this too much is a means by which you will be left in the lurch. So you will be unhelped. There is no one who can give you your answers. وَالسُّلَّمُ الْحِرْمَانِ وَالدَّرَجَةُ الطُّغْيَانِ. And it is the ladder to hirman, to being deprived. And it is a grade of transgression. So let us take some talking points. As for the definition of al-qadr, which is translated to decree, it is when Allah Jalla wa Ala decides a matter before it occurs. So this means that He firstly knows about it, and secondly He writes it down in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, and whatever He wills will come to pass, and whatever He does not will not come to pass. And like we said before, that the qadr needs to be explained in 4 stages. The first one is the antecedent knowledge of Allah Jalla wa Ala about an event. Secondly is the kitaba, when He writes it down. Thirdly is His will, when He wills it to happen. And fourthly is the khalq, which is the creation, that Allah Jalla wa Ala creates everything, even non-physical matters like your actions. So as for the knowledge, then we have spoken about that. Then as for the kitaba, which is writing it down, do we have any knowledge about this? Yes, we do. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ فِي كِتَابٍ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. Do you not know that Allah knows everything in the heavens and the earth? Verily that is in a book, verily that is easy for Allah. Likewise, in Surah Al-Qamar, وَكُلُّ صَغِيرٍ وَكَبِيرٍ مُسْتَطَرٍ. And every small and large matter has been recorded in a script. And in the Sahih, قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَقَادِيرَ الْخَلَائِقِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَخْلُقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ ب50,000 سَنَةٍ وَكَانَ عَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ. Allah decreed everything of His creation 50,000 years before creating the heavens and the earth, and His throne was on the water. Now this writing itself is on different stages. First we have the Lawh al-Mahfuz, in which everything is written down. But then we can scale down a bit, zoom in, and have the kitaba, the writing for a person's life. And we are referring to the hadith where when a person is born, the angel comes and writes down 4 matters: his rizq, his lifespan, his actions, and whether he will be wretched or happy. So this is, if you like, a personal writing down. Then we have the writing down every year, and that is on Laylatul Qadr. فِيهَا يُفْرَقُ كُلُّ أَمْرٍ حَكِيمٍ. Every wise matter is decided. So that's yearly or annually. Then we have daily writing, as in Allah's statement, كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Every day He is involved in some matters. Then we have the third stage, which we mentioned out of the 4, that is the Mashi'ah, which is the will. Plenty of evidence for this as well. For example, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. And you cannot will except that Allah wills. Verily Allah is the knowledgeable, the wise. This ayah actually clearly links between the will of Allah and His knowledge and wisdom. Because He says, you cannot will until He wills. Verily Allah is the knowledgeable, the wise. Meaning, the will of Allah is based upon His knowledge and wisdom. It is not some sort of arbitrary thing. Now here it is well worth noting that the Mashi'ah of Allah Jalla wa Ala is the same as His irada kawniyah. Irada meaning wanting, kawniyah meaning universal. His universal wanting. And this is as opposed to his irada shar'iyya, his shar'i wanting. What is the difference? His irada kawniyya are things which he wants but does not necessarily love. For example, somebody committing kufr. It happened because Allah willed it, but he does not love it. But the point about irada kawniyya is that it absolutely must take place. As for his irada shar'iyya, it is something which Allah loves. It's the same as his mahabba, his love, but it does not necessarily take place. For example, Allah Jalla wa Ala loved for Abu Lahab to become a Muslim. He wanted this to happen, the irada shar'iyya, but did it actually manifest? No. So the irada shar'iyya is something that Allah always loves but does not have to happen, and the irada kawniyya is something that Allah does not necessarily love but it always does have to happen. So if somebody asks that this kafir who is upon his kufr, did Allah want this to happen? Or we ask him, is it actually happening? And if he says yes, it clearly is, it's happening right in front of our eyes as we speak, then we say, if it is actually happening in the real world, then Allah did will it and want it to happen. But if he says that Allah cannot want kufr to happen, doesn't Allah say in the Quran, وَلَا يَرْضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ, and He is not pleased with kufr for His servants? We say in reply, you're getting love and wanting mixed up. Love and want are two different things. He does not love kufr, but he may still want it to happen. You may not love the bitter medicine, but you may still want to take it. This is the crucial point, because if you deny this, then let us follow this through to its logical outworking. Well, let us then suppose that Allah did not want this kafir to commit kufr, yet we find that he is committing kufr. What does that mean? That means there's something happening in the universe of Allah Jalla wa Ala which He did not want to happen. In other words, He does not have power over certain aspects of His universe. Clearly. So in other words, He does not have total dominion and control and authority and power over His universe. That in turn means He is not all-powerful, and His dominion is deficient. That means He has a deficiency. That in turn means He is not worthy of worship. So if we follow it through, the logical outworking for opposing this belief is actually kufr. You may not realize it, but it does logically lead to kufr. And then we have the fourth stage, which is the creation, that Allah creates everything. The obedience of the Muslim is a creation of Allah. The disobedience of the kafir, or the disobedient fellow, is a creation of Allah. In Surah Al-Furqan, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا, and He has created everything and has made a decree for it. With regards specifically to our actions, وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَكُمْ وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ, and Allah created you and that which you do, your amal. So with every event which takes place, it is necessary for us to have certainty that firstly, Allah knew it, His antecedent knowledge, secondly, it was written down, thirdly, He willed it to happen, and fourthly, it is His creation. If any of these four ingredients are missing, then you do not have Iman in the qadr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So with these four elements, we understand the technical definition of the word al-qadr. As for the linguistic definition, then it is to put something in order, or to order something, to form something in a particular way. So you could be planning something out so that the event turns out a particular way. So this is your taqdeer. When you make something or arrange something so that it turns out to be a particular way. So understood like this, then the word includes physical actions, it includes an irada, you want to do something, your intention, it includes a mashi'a, your will, because you will something to happen some way, and also includes your knowledge, because you need to have knowledge to make taqdeer, and it also includes hikmah, because you're doing it the way you're doing it due to some sort of reason. The next word we need to consider is the word al-qada, which in the language means to complete something. In the Quran, if the word qada is followed by the preposition ila, then it means to give a wahi, an inspiration to someone. As in, for example, وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَيْهِ ذَلِكَ الْأَمْرَ أَنَّ دَابِرَ هَؤُلَاءِ مَقْطُوعٌ مُصْبِحِينَ. We made known this decree to him that the root of the evildoers will be cut off in the early morning. This is about the story of Lut alayhi salam. So the word qada followed by the preposition ila is used, which means to give a wahi, to inform someone. Allah Jalla wa Ala informed Lut alayhi salam that the evildoers will be destroyed in the morning. The word qada can also mean qadar. So for example, فَلَمَّا قَضَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ الْمَوْتُ مَا دَلَّهُمْ عَلَى مَوْتِهِ إِلَّا دَابَّةُ الْأَرْضِ تَأْكُلُ مِنْ سَأَتَهِ. And when we decreed the death for him, nothing informed the jinn of the death of him, meaning Sulaiman alayhi salam, except this little creature of the earth which ate into his staff. That's in Surah As-Saba. Likewise in Fussilat, فَقَضَاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ. And we decreed it as 7 heavens in 2 days. The word day, of course, spelled with a capital D, so it means epochs. And so because of this, many scholars said that the word al-qada and al-qadar mean the same thing. As for other scholars, they said that al-qada is the manifestation of the qadar. So the qadar is the pre-decree before it happens, and the qada is actually when it manifests. So before an event manifests, it is not called qada, but it is qadar. And this is the better opinion in accordance with what we understand from the Quran, that the word al-qada is when the qadar actually takes place. It is the finishing off of the qadar. So the qadar has the important ingredients, the knowledge, the writing down, the mashi'a, the will, and the khalq, the creation. Whereas with the qada, we are just dealing with the last 2 of these ingredients, the mashi'a and the khalq. Okay, now let us talk about why the Qadariyah went wrong. The Qadariyah, of course, those who deny the Qadar, so they say that when a servant commits evil, then Allah did not will this to happen. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala does not will anything which is evil, anything which He is not pleased with. Now the reason why these people go wrong is because they make an analogy between Allah and the creation. So they say that actions which are evil when done from man are also evil when done from Allah. And actions which are praiseworthy when done from a human are also praiseworthy when done from Allah. So based upon this, whatever action is considered to be just when done from man, they also consider it to be just when done from Allah. And whatever action is considered to be oppression when done from man, they also consider it to be oppression when done from Allah Jalla wa Ala. So, if a person commits kufr, they say that this action done from a man is a dhulm, because we know that kufr is the greatest form of dhulm. So they say that Allah did not create this kufr, nor did He will it, because it is dhulm, and Allah is free from dhulm. So kufr from man is dhulm, therefore kufr cannot be a creation of Allah, because that would mean that this kufr is from Allah, and that is dhulm, and Allah is free from dhulm. So you see that they make the analogy between actions of man and actions of Allah. So this is the first root cause of their misguidance, is that they make an analogy between actions of man and actions of Allah. So whatever justice or oppression applies to man must also apply to Allah. And that is their mistake which they have fallen into. The second mistake, or the second root cause of their misguidance, is that they fail to distinguish between irada shar'iyyah and irada kawniyah. And we have spoken about the difference before, but they seem to think just because Allah has willed it means He loves it. And that is not true, because there's a clear difference between wanting something and loving something. You could want to take the bitter medicine, but you may not love it. And then on the other hand, you could love something without wanting it. You may, for example, love a particular model of car, but you may not want that model of car, because you already have a great car as it is. So you could love something yet not want it, and you could want something yet not love it. And the third root cause is that when it comes to particular actions, they let their own intellects decide what is good and bad. So what they do is that they make their own intellects the ultimate arbitrator in deciding that which is beautiful and that which is ugly, that which is good and that which is bad. So if a particular action they deem to be ugly, or bad, let's say, then they will say that Allah Jalla wa Ala could not create such a thing and could not will such a thing, because He is free from it. And then we have the fourth root cause, which is delving and debating about the actions of Allah, what Allah does and why He does what He does, and not submitting to what Allah has willed and wanted to happen. And as Shaykh al-Tahaawiyyah says himself, it is the dhari'atul khidlan. It is the means of being left in the lurch. Sullamul hirman. It is the staircase which leads you to deprivation. Wadarajatud dughyan. It is a grade of transgression. So you'll be left in the lurch. You want to know why Allah does what He does. You will not understand this. And you will not reach this knowledge, so you will be left in the lurch without any help. And you will be deprived, because you will be deprived of the knowledge that you seek. What you're seeking is a secret, and it is a daraja of tughyan. Daraja meaning grade, or when you increase yourself in grades. So it's basically like saying you're getting too big for your shoe size. You're transgressing. As Allah Jalla wa Ala says, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. He is not questioned about what he does, but they will be questioned. So when you start asking questions like, why does he do this and why does he do that? Like we said before, you're opening up a can of worms, because even if we allow such a question, then the whole of mankind, all 7 odd billion of them, will come with thousands and millions of questions. Why this? Why that? For every little or large event, there will always be a question. Why this? Why that? But rather, the true Muslim does not need to be asking such questions. He submits, and that's what Islam is. You submit to Allah Jalla wa Ala and to what He has willed. And as has been said from one of the earlier Muslims, that being unable to comprehend the wisdom of Allah Jalla wa Ala is a comprehension in itself. Why is this? Because we realize that our knowledge and comprehension is limited. So that in and of itself, if you realize this, then you've actually comprehended a great deal. You've comprehended the fact that your knowledge and comprehension is limited, which is why you're not going to delve into affairs you do not have the right to delve into. Whereas the ignorant one does not realize that his comprehension is limited, so he's going to delve into affairs which he has no right to delve into, such as, why does Allah do what He does? Just think about it. Human beings, with their limited frame of reference, meaning their limited time to a limited place and a limited cognitive ability, these 3 references are limited. So if these are limited, then your frame of reference is limited. So how can such a person now comprehend the wisdom of Allah Jalla wa Ala, who is beyond time, beyond space, and has limitless knowledge? There's simply no comparison. And therefore the human has no right to make judgments about what Allah Jalla wa Ala does. Nor does he have the right to object. You only have the right to object and make judgments when you have full knowledge. Okay, let us take a few review questions. Question number 1. What are the 4 stages of qadr? Question number 2. There are some ayat in the Quran which give off the idea that Allah comes to know certain things. Is this true? And if it's not true, how do you explain these ayat? Question 3. What is the difference between qadr and qada? And question 4. We mentioned 4 vital reasons as to why the Qadariyah go astray. Recall these 4 reasons.